Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Natasha Kipper, and I'm the Training Services Manager for QubicaAMF. I will be your moderator for today's webinar. Thank you so much for joining us today. To support our bowling community, we have asked some of our industry leaders and experts to join us today and share their experience and some best practices on how they are navigating change and uncertainty in this confusing and very dynamic environment, and maybe even share some challenges and roadblocks they're dealing with as well. As I'm sure many, if not all of you, are well aware of the resources and information that is available at this time. Some of the recent discussions include last week's webinar hosted by BPAA with policy experts and BPAA government relations consultants, Michael Best Strategies. Also, yesterday's Facebook Live event on our Beyond the Frame Facebook group with Frank DeSocio, Executive Director of BPAA. Frank shared what the industry is doing as a response to COVID-19 and highlighted some examples of what he has seen, such as proprietors helping proprietors, bowling centers helping communities, and how amazing it is to see how close-knit our industry really is and how committed we all are to the mission of support bowling. Our goal today is to help businesses digest the available information that has been shared, and as you know, I'm sure there's a lot out there, and give you firsthand advice of what other proprietors are doing to take advantage of these resources. But before we deep dive into our topics today, let me introduce you to our panel of experts. With me, I have Brian Kane, who is the Senior Scoring Technology Expert and has been working with QubicaAMF systems for over 25 years. He owns and operates his own center in Pennsylvania and has a vast amount of systems knowledge and industry experience. Brian has been in the bowling industry for over 30 years. He has been an invaluable asset to our company as well as our customers and bowling industry. Today as well, we have John Lucido with us. John has contributed to bowling for more than 45 years. Not only as an accomplished amateur and professional bowler, but also as a coach and longtime leader in local and national associations. Since 1998, he has also been the owner and operator of Sun Valley Lanes and leads the way in involving the bowling business. In 2017, John was honored as the BPAA National Bowling Proprietor of the Year. Next, a man who really needs no introduction, Pat Sinello, is the owner-operator of multiple bowling and entertainment centers in Southwest Florida. Pat has just celebrated 40 years of ownership in the bowling center business and is a past Victor Lerner Award winner and also happens to be the chairman of the board for QubicaAMF. Pat Centers in Florida closed to the public nearly 2 weeks ago. And like many of you, Pat has been working very hard to understand what programs are out there to help during this period. He has been at the forefront of dealing with the SBA and banks over the past few weeks concerning the COVID-19 crisis and is here to share with you what he is doing to protect his centers during this global situation. Joining Pat today is Lisa Sinella. Lisa is the Vice President of Bowling Management Associates, the company she co-owns with her husband, Pat. Lisa handles all activities related to finances, human resources, and creative works for their organization. In addition, Lisa sits on numerous committees within the bowling industry and has been instrumental working with the team in bowling management and Dazzle to deliver the tool they're going to share with you today. And last but not least, Jesse Hamilton is joining us today as well. Jesse has been working for Pat and Lisa for over 10 years. For the past 7 years, Jesse has been the product and training manager for Dazzle, an accounting product utilized by many bowling center operators today. Dazzle provides daily accounting tools for hundreds of centers and military locations across the world. Welcome, guys. Without further ado, let's dive into our topics for today. I want to begin today's dialogue by asking our experts, how has your center or centers been impacted so far, and how are you handling your current situations? Are any parts of your business still open, like your food and beverage operation? Have you been able to retain your current staff? Things of that nature. Pat and Lisa, let's hear your side first.
Hi, everyone. This is Lisa Sinello. Yes, sadly, March 17th was the day that we pretty much were told that we were going to have to close our business. Most of our leagues, out of fear, had quickly canceled their leagues. And we decided that it was just more prudent for us to go ahead and close the bowling centers down. We waited a couple of days to see how things were, shaping up with the COVID-19 and what was going on around the world. And within a few days, we went ahead and started furloughing pretty much 90% of our staff, which was very, very sad, but necessary. And we ended up with hanging on to our basically our core people in the company, the key people that help run our bowling centers, our directors, center management, IT department, and sales, mechanics. And so we hung on to quite a few people, and we just regrouped and said, look, for the time being while we're down, we want to keep everybody on the payroll, or these people, the key people on the payroll. And we started looking at each location and coming up with projects that we've been trying to get to for lots and lots of time. And now suddenly we had all this time on our hands. So we've been cleaning, tearing up tiles, repainting, replacing bumpers, just all kinds of different projects. So we've been doing that for the last couple of weeks. And then they had Florida on a total lockdown, and don't leave your home, stay at home. And we decided that in an effort to keep our staff working, we went ahead and opened up our kitchens just to do pizza and wings, so that we then became considered an essential business. And we established safety protocols, masks, gloves, that sort of thing, set up an online ordering process, so there's no handling cash and customers can order. And by doing this, it wasn't about making money on food and beverages. It was about keeping other people inside the building and continuing to work. And so that's what we've done. And since we've closed, we've been trying to stay in contact with our furloughed employees and offering them meals and calling them and having them come and pick up the meals at a certain time. And we've been doing that.
Third week.
Yeah, this is our third week that we're doing that, and they really sincerely appreciate it. The other thing that we did right away was through our IT department. We have an employee portal, and we put on there all kinds of resources to help them, from a link to reemployment, unemployment, to food banks, and just lots of different assistance that they could reach out to. And this is the first time, as I'm sure many of you, we have ever laid off anybody. Very hard.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Lisa, for sharing that. It sounds like you're doing all the right things, and I'm sure there's a huge amount of effort and work and planning that's taking place to be able to pull all of this off. And I trust your employees are absolutely grateful for everything that you do for them. Thank you again for sharing that. John, how about you? You've been quite busy last couple of months, or last couple of weeks rather.
Yes, Monday, March 16th was our last regular day of operations. Although here in Nebraska, we have things a little bit differently than most places. We're still not under a stay-at-home order. I could see the handwriting on the wall with what was coming, so I just decided immediately that on the 17th, we would just cease operations for regular bowling operations. At that moment, I basically laid off all of my part-time staff, but I've kept all my full-time staff on. I called them all into the building the next day and said, hey, I said, here's the deal. We could either stick our head in the sand or just try to fight it the best we can. I can continue to pay you for a while, so let's be proactive as opposed to trying to run away from this sum. So we basically, I have all my full-time staff still working. By the end of that week, again, I'm in a little bit of a different situation. I'm smack dab in the middle of a $4 million renovation and expansion. So this was going to cause a couple of different issues. I had planned on shutting down my grill, my food and bar operations on May 11th. I got with a contractor and we decided to just move everything up. So we really literally started ripping stuff apart and shut everything down, with the exception of we've kept our pizza operation open because our pizza operation was in a separate room. And up until this past weekend, it had remained in its original room. We've now moved it out into a different place that the health department has given us the okay on within the center. So we're being a little bit creative. You know, we have to use wash tubs, 3 wash tubs with the sanitizer in one, the rinse in one, and the wash in one to be able to utensils, but we're doing everything else via paper, and we're doing takeout and curbside delivery for both pizza and beer. They changed the liquor laws here in Nebraska temporarily. We can actually deliver, you know, a Captain and Pepsi in a cup to go if we want to here in Nebraska, but we haven't done any of that. We're doing beer and pizza. So yeah, it's a little bit of a strange situation for us in the sense that we've moved up our renovation plans. You know, I would never have wished the situation on anyone. But invariably, the only silver lining for me is that I'm being able to do this, create this chaos in my center while we're closed. So that's the only really good thing. And I'm doing my best to keep my full-time staff on. And we've updated our league people via Facebook, kind of what's going on. But again, it's a little bit of a tough situation because we don't know yet when we'll reopen. Currently in Lincoln, they've given us May 6th as the target date to reopen, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think invariably to be closer towards Memorial Day. But that's where we're at, and we're moving forward on things best we can, and just dealing the hand that we were dealt.
Wow. Yes, that sounds like a lot to deal with, and especially in such a short period of time. But I am glad you were able to at least get a head start on some of the construction now that you don't have business anyway. And of course, I mean, what's more essential than pizza and beer? I think a lot of people would agree with this. Thank you, John, so much for sharing this. And Brian, how are things looking on your end?
So we've had it a little bit tougher being a smaller center. We only have 12 lanes. We were actually, the governor actually made us close on the 17th of March as well. All non-essential businesses were forced that day to close. And that lasted for about the first week before they started the stay-at-home order, which we've been under now for the last couple of weeks, which is at this point running at least until the end of April. Right away, that when we knew that Monday night that was going to be our last night of business at the center, the first thing that I started to think about was what we could do to cut back on expenses that were going to come in during the time that we were going to be closed. So we started thinking about all of the things that we could basically clean real well and shut down completely to make sure that we could save on, like utility costs, our heating costs, electrical, everything that could save us there. Unfortunately, we also had to lay off our part-timers at that time. We have a few full-timers that we did keep on, and what we decided to do was, normally most centers at the start of the summer start to do, you know, the preventive maintenance schedule for what they're going to do over the summertime before winter leagues kick back in. So I decided now was the time really to start to do that. Since now the center was going to be closed, we might as well utilize some of that time, and I could keep those guys still working that were still needing to also obviously collect some money to live on as well. So we really pushed toward doing that. My center is also attached to some rental units, so I have some apartments and rental units, and we had planned to do some upgrading and some things to change inside of those. So we spent the last couple weeks really going through those and renting out everything that was available so that at least we have that income coming in. So we tried to think ahead to be able to keep on the guys that we could and pay them as long as we could, and still be able to have some income coming in for the business, since on the bowling side, at this moment, we weren't able to do anything. The nice thing is it's getting us, again, as John said, there is some saving grace, because it's allowed us to get some of the things that we would really be pushing to get done in the summer started early so that they will obviously get done a little bit sooner. And we're hoping that when they do allow us to reopen, that we'll be able to then take advantage of hopefully some extra business coming in here in the Northeast in the summer is always a slower time. We're hoping with everyone being trapped at home and not much to do, that maybe they'll stay local for vacations and want to do things more localized. So we're hoping that that can be a saving grace. At this point, we don't know. They haven't set an opening date for us. Right now, we're basically closed until they say different. Initially, they had given some dates. They stopped giving dates now for a reopen. And it looks like they plan to phase in how that opening happens. So they'll open some businesses first, others will be phased in later, and we don't know the crowd sizes that will be allowed at the start of when they reopen. So going forward, we just are trying to keep on as many of the guys that we can working and trying to stay up with things that we would normally do over the summertime. If this had happened 6 weeks later than it did, we would have been probably in a very different situation than we are today because our business would have already slowed down. But unfortunately, at the time it hit, it's probably 6 of the busiest weeks for our bowling season.
Sure, I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that as well. Thank you, Brian, so much for sharing this. 3 very unique and different situations from what I'm hearing here, but there are 2 things that stood out to me. One is you're doing everything you can to make the best of this awful situation that we're all in right now. And number 2, all of you are working very hard and trying to be as creative as you can to take care of your employees and help them get through this as well. That's just impressive. Okay, again, thank you so much for sharing this. Let's switch gears and discuss some of the resources available that bowling centers and operators such as yourselves might be able to take advantage of during this time. Pat, we know you have been very involved with many conversations with BPAA and other proprietors and organizations regarding this topic. Can you share with our viewers what are some of the resources you're taking advantage of, and maybe even more importantly, any advice on how to navigate through the overwhelming amount of information that is out there?
Yeah, the biggest problem with the whole program, it was changing by the hour. As soon as you thought you knew you knew everything about it, they changed the elements. I got involved very early with it. Jeff Bourget, Debbie Bourget, and myself. We had a copy of the CARE Act, so we started jumping on that right away. And one of the main things I did was contact our bankers. We have 4 different bankers that we deal with because we've got a multitude of companies, 6 bowling centers, but we have our management company and a few other entities that we have. So we built a relationship, and the big thing was getting in contact with the bank and know who it was. Presently, the problem out there is if you don't have a banking relationship, you're going to find it difficult. What I mean by a banking relationship is that means they want you to have your business account there and personal accounts there. A lot of the banks are turning away people, and this is on the big banks. Wells Fargo was supposed to, have 1 million applications go through their program, and as most of you may know, they closed it down, but they cut a deal with the federal government today. And basically, they're going to be opening it up at 11:30 today. There was an agreement between the federal government to allow them to change their balance sheets and take on more loans. But it left a lot of people out there wondering where to go if you had a Wells Fargo relationship. We did have that, but I didn't feel comfortable, so I put an application in with them. But I also put an application in with our local bank, and I did get a decline, not decline, I was just put in the queue waiting for Wells Fargo to give us the approval while we're getting the approval on the local branch. So it doesn't hurt to have a few irons in the fire to make sure that you're there. If you haven't filed yet, or you haven't reached out to your bank and you think by waiting is going to help you, don't do that. you really need to go out there. The money's going to run out. Actually, there's a bill to increase it by another $250 billion. And they say we're not going to run out of money, but there's no funding yet. There's still a lot of confusion at the SBA, a lot of confusion on the banks. Now we're dealing with national banks like Wells Fargo, a regional bank like Synovus, and we're dealing with 2 local banks on it. I will promise you one thing. They'll all interpret the programs differently. They'll change the dates on where they want you to give the information on the previous year or the trailing 12 months. In the midst of everything, they'll change that. They'll change the application now. Some of them, like Synovus, is online. The others are in forms, but that application changed about 3 times throughout the process on it. So it's been very trying, and even just about an hour ago, we got a call from our banker saying, oh, you have to redo this form and you have to list all of your other entities on the form. So this is the PPP program, which basically I feel is the best program out there because you're able to satisfy your payrolls during that period of time. Also, it gives you the ability to pay interest on your mortgage, also for utilities and internet. So that's electric, gas, and water, and that could, the payrolls have to be at least 75% of the amount of money that you could save. And Jesse's going to go through the sheet. What I did was get with Jesse, and we did a formula together to come up with an app that will help you understand the act, and the most importantly, what has to be done during the 8 weeks once you get funded. And the program doesn't start until you have the money in the bank. Once they fund you, you get approved, you fund it, that starts the 8-week period. That's very important. And the 8th week is probably the most important because this is where they're going to do the full-time and the equivalent full-time to come up with your employee count. So if you were at 30 employees during the period that you chose, when you end the program, they want you to be near that, or you're going to get a percentage of the eligible dollars from there. So again, the most important thing is being proactive. Please don't be waiting out there. Contact your local bank. If you've had a relationship for a long time, get with them. They've extended this program to basically non-SBA lenders. So some of the community banks and the credit unions are available to do it. And they seem to be very progressive in getting out there because there's a reward. They're getting 5% on the, from up to $350,000 on their loan. So that they're going to be making money at that point on it. There's one other important thing. If you have a 7A present mortgage or you have a 504 present mortgage, the government is going to pay 6 months principal and interest on that loan. It's going to be forgiven. So that's an important part of it that we're fortunate we have one 504 in our newest location. John had an SBA before, but I think he may have changed. But if you're in that SBA program, you need to reach out, or they may have already reached out to you to tell you that your payments are forgiven. That's only on the SBA portion. If the banks are involved, that portion, it's good to get with them and definitely call them up and ask them for a 90-day interest only on your mortgage. I would suggest you get in touch with any of your vendors out there if you have payments to try to, work out some deferred payments on it to help you during the period until you're funded. So there's a lot of dollars out there to get. Just don't stick your head in the sand. Be out there and contact the people who can help you out through the process. Thank
Wow. Thank you, Pat, for a keen insight. That's definitely a lot of information. I try to take notes and keep up. And here's my main takeaways. Don't wait, be proactive. Eventually they're going to run out of money. So do things as quickly as possible. That would be my biggest takeaway. Thank you again for sharing all of this.
You're welcome.
John, what's been your experience?
Well, I also, Pat kind of hit on it. I mean, basically, and Pat was right. I did have a 504 loan, but that loan was closed when I got into the construction loan process of my expansion. So as soon as that information came out from the government, and it was changing all the time, in my case, I obviously have a relationship with my banker. I mean, obviously they're working with me on my project as it is. And they've been great at trying to stay in touch with me about what's going on. But when the original legislation came out that week in March, towards the end of that week, I saw the EIDL loan, which was basically that $10,000 grant that I thought, well, I better apply for that to be safe. And then the PPP information became more detailed a couple days later. So I thought, well, maybe I applied for the EIDL loan and went and applied for the PPP. But through my bank, and my bank's a small community bank, they actually came out and said, we don't have the IT power to do what we need to do for all our businesses, so we're going to recommend going to a third-party lender. And you can, I think in probably most cases, most people can find an SBA lender by just Googling it, SBA lenders in my state or something to that effect.
Sure.
So try to find an SBA lender if you don't have a relationship with a bank. But they were very good about keeping me informed on what was going on. But they sent me to a company called Cabbage, which I think some people have probably heard of, because they just said we can't do it. This is a PPP provider that the government has recommended and that's what we've selected. So I filled it out over the last weekend with them, and then the bank recently contacted me as of yesterday, actually, and said, hey, have you completed that information? I said, well, I did. They said, well, send it back to us again because we've changed how we're doing it. So even my own bank, did an about face 4 days later because it had changed. And I think Pat might have alluded to it. I think the fact that the banks are making money off processing these loans, so maybe they found the IT people to be able to handle what they were doing. But it's something that has worked out, and we're just waiting for that funding to occur. And it's true. I mean, you have to provide a bunch of information, 941s and other things that were required for the PPP processing. And Pat's correct. Basically everything Pat said is what I understand it to be too. So it's just a matter of waiting till we get to that point to be able to do that. So again, one of the great things that Pat mentioned is, try to have a relationship with a banker, not using a current loan, because invariably, in situations like this, they're obviously very helpful. So
Yes, for sure. Wow, definitely a lot of things to navigate through. And I've gotten a little bit of a preview on this over the past few weeks as I've been talking to Brian Kane, and he's shared some of the struggles, and I'm just, amazed by how quickly things changed over time, over the last couple of weeks, and all of the things that you guys have to go through to take advantage of some of these programs. So, Brian, can you share some of your experience with our viewers? As you mentioned before, you're in a little bit of a different situation, being a small center. Can you share some of your experience?
Absolutely. I can attest to what both John and Pat had said. Things seem to change by the hour in regards to a lot of the programs that are out there. We ran into a little bit of a unique situation. I had been dealing with PNC Bank for probably 20 plus years. But just at the end of February, PNC decided to close their branch in our town. So I thought at that time, at the beginning of March, was the perfect opportunity for us to switch banks. And we had made a decision to switch to a small bank in our community. And we made that change at the beginning of March. If I would have knew some of the things I knew today, I might have waited to make that change. As Pat pointed out, some of the bigger issues that come up is some of the local banks, most of the local banks, unless you have a relationship with them, do not want to sit down and do anything with you in regards to the PPP program. You have to have, for most of them, a relationship. So when I checked with the new smaller bank that we were with, they were really lost at the time. And I'm not sure that they were even looking into doing anything for the PPP program. But I pushed them a little bit. And just as of yesterday, I finally got paperwork from them in regards to being able to apply through them for the PPP loan program. The issues that, I mean, I was more concerned when I started doing some of the work. I looked at the EIDL loan, and I had considered, you know, I thought that that was going to be a lot more of a process than what the PPP program was going to be. Well, it turned out to be completely different. Through the SBA, I was able to actually apply for the EIDL loan, and it was very simple, very straightforward, very easy to do and apply for. So I have that done. I'm just waiting to get an answer back in regards to it and the grant. The PPP program, the issues I ran into being a sole proprietorship was nobody has the answers as to how, for a sole proprietor, you can apply off of your Schedule C. Do you use gross? Do you use net? What do you come up with for payroll? And nobody seems to have those answers. I mean, I have probably talking now to 7 different banks, and none of them really have any leadway other than to keep pushing you to go to the federal site and look at their paperwork and the forms they have there. But nobody's able to clarify exactly what it is that needs to be done in regards to that. So at this point, I have stuff started with the PPP, but we're still waiting in regards to what needs to happen there. So that I found to be, for us being smaller, a much tougher situation. But Pat and John are correct. I think that if you have a great relationship with your local bank and they are working with this program, it's definitely going to be a plus for any of you proprietors that actually decide to use that program and go through your local bank.
Wow. That's certainly still a lot of unknown at this time, but it sounds like a very challenging thing to go through. And Brian, I'm sure our viewers can resonate with everything that every single one of you has said. It doesn't sound easy at all. So with all of this being said, I'm curious, where do you go from here? What are your next steps? Brian, let's start with you on this one. Let's go in the reverse.
Well, my next steps are, again, I'm going to figure out exactly what needs to be done for the PPP program one way or another to get that going. I'm waiting back on the EIDL loan, and hopefully that goes through. Being smaller, and being in the business as long as I have, obviously I put money away for retirement. So from this point forward, I'm using some of that money to keep things going, because the couple of full-time employees that I do have, obviously they rely on us for business as well. So we're going to try to help them as much as we can, whether or not we get either one of these programs going, because I don't want them to be short as well. So I'm going to do what I can for them, but I also have to be concerned about my business. So as I pointed out earlier, what I really started to do was try to get ahead on some of the things that we normally do over the summertime, so that we have that stuff done. So that payroll would have got used anyway. And the second is some of our rental units and things of that nature, we've gotten, finished up to rent out. Where in John and Pat's place, obviously they have a bigger food and beverage, so they're able to utilize some of that. So we're just trying to do what we can, whatever is going to be best, one, for my business as well as for my employees. We want to satisfy everyone. And we're trying to stay as consistent with our customer upkeep as possible. We try to stay in contact with them, through email, through Facebook, through the website. We're trying to do as much as we can, because we want them to at least keep bowling top of mind. Because as you know, they always say, if you do something long enough for 30 days or longer, it becomes a habit. So my concern is when you have a lot of people that aren't bowling for 30 plus days, that maybe they start to lose that idea. So we're trying to do everything we can to encourage and keep top of mind for all of them, in regards to bowling. So hopefully going forward, when we all start to come out of this, we can pick back up where we were and hopefully be stronger.
You got it. Absolutely. That's a very nice way to say it. Hopefully we can come out of this even stronger. Thank you so much, Brian. John, what's in it for you? What are your next steps?
Well, as Brian had sort of alluded to, I mean, being in a northern climate, we expect, the summers are going to be slow. And part of my whole thought behind the renovation and expansion was to try to develop some summer income. So fortunately, I've had a little bit of money in the bank that I can continue to pay my full-time staff for a while. And I can't do it forever, obviously, but
Right.
being that, we needed to do some stuff anyway, it's actually working out well in the sense of converting from a bowling center to an FEC. There's a bunch of different things we have to do, from management to, the mode of operation, and even, looking at our culture. So the management portion and my management team has started focusing on, we're going to start doing group interviews. I spoke to my friend Nancy Shank the other day about how she does hers, and making those changes. At the same time, we're doing pin spotter maintenance. We're cleaning things that we've never ever cleaned before. And the was, all those times that I've ever said, it'd be nice to do this if we, had time or we were closed.
You had time, right?
Well, we got a whole sorts of time, and so we're doing all sorts of things. Like we gutted our offices the other day and painted and recarpeted, and that wasn't a part of the plan. So it's just finding those things to do. And believe me, I have a couple of full-time cooks. I have several managers.
I made a typo and I'm annoyed.
They're all stepping up doing different things. So it's great.
You're gonna laugh.
Pull together. So yeah, it's that's what's going on.
Fantastic. Thank you, John, for sharing that. I'm sure the venue is going to look beautiful and it's going to be fantastic once everything is complete. I'm very much looking forward to that.
Let's hope.
Yes, I'm sure it will be. Lisa, Pat, what are your next steps?
Well, at least it's good.
Well, we're doing a lot of what Brian and John are doing, like I said originally, about getting our places in good shape and keeping in contact. And a subject that hasn't been brought up yet, that some of you might be dealing with, is your league banking funds. We have still quite a lot of money that's in our separate league banking account. And we're not really getting a whole lot of leagues reaching out. We've got some senior leagues that have reached out and said, hey, we're going back up north, we want our money. And we, based on the information that came out from USBC, we took a company stance that we will not be cutting checks to 1 or 2 league officers to distribute cash. Of course, everybody's on lockdown, so you can't have a group gathering. So even though it's extra work for us, the few leagues I've closed, I'm requesting revised prize fund, proof that they, are giving back any prepaid fees that they may have paid, like to the end of their season, and maybe there's 4 or 6 weeks left. Pat and I and Mark, we've already paid for our 36 weeks, so that's an example of money that really should go back to the bowler. And also we're going to be, I asked for addresses, and we will be, I typed and mailing them and charging just $1 processing fee to cover the. So our bowlers are definitely going to be in contact with this because we got a lot of their money still.
Right.
The other way that we're staying, relevant. I don't know who started this. I think it's somebody somewhere in the bowling industry.
John.
Those little Facebook text the text messages with the bowling will be back. It's just hysterical. And I see that being shared on Facebook. We've put out videos showing us serving our employees, and I'm sure most of you have probably seen those videos. We're trying to just continue that open dialogue. Our call center is open, so we're taking phone calls. So, this way we're at least connected. So they've got a way to get through. And if our call center is not staffed with a member, the calls are being forwarded to a central location in our teams that somebody responds to it. So I think that's the key thing, is just being in contact, letting bowlers know we're missing them, and just continue to be pushing that we can't wait to get them back in the center. We did a video showing us cleaning bowling balls, cleaning shoes, just let them know that we care and we want them back. I think that that's really relevant, and we will be calling and, just getting on the phone and calling our bowlers and reminding them. We do have quite a few of our evening leagues are waiting. They want to finish their last 3 weeks. So, and we hope and want them to. So that's, I think a good thing too. So I did want to bring up the league banking because that's, I think, something people like.
Yeah. And we're fortunate down south
Yes.
with the summers. Our business is pretty strong. It's very hot and it rains quite a bit.
Right.
The only question we have is with the social distancing. If the people are going to come back. Right now, we believe they have cabin fever. If they want to come back, they want to bowl, and we're going to keep in touch, as Lisa said, with them. We're going to invite them back and make them feel comfortable. We want them, when they come back into the facility, that the sanitation that we're going through, and I've been talking to a few of the manufacturers out there about coming up with a cleaner for the bowling balls, a cleaner for, the shoes, a few Kegels working on some projects on that end of it. And we'll be working on ourselves at QubicaAMF. But we need to make them feel comfortable. We have, before we closed, all of our wait staff were wearing gloves. At this point, we have the people delivering the food. We just started this, wearing masks out there. We have to have them, and how we're going to do business. We may not be able to do business as we did before. There may be change in the model, and we're going to have to, adjust to what that is. If it's at the beginning, having every hour of the lane and keeping the distance there, we'll start off there and keeping someone in the food. And as the virus gets more under control, and maybe, we have the vaccine for it, maybe we can get back to where we were, but it's not going to be an overnight.
Yes. Pat, I agree with you. Thank you for bringing that up. I've been actually talking with Brian a lot about this because he continues to ask those questions. What are we going to do? What are we going to advise customers to do? How are we going to handle these things? I agree with you. I think people are going to have cabin fever, and we've seen across the country how difficult it's been to get people to stay home. And so being away from all of these activities that they enjoy doing, including bowling, I think we're going to see people anxious to get out there and socialize and do things they enjoy doing prior to the situation. But I 100% agree with you and Brian, and I'm sure many others. I do believe bowlers are going to be cautious coming back. And internally, we have discussed many of these options on how do we help proprietors and operators overcome that? What is that new business model going to look like? Several different things that may happen between, now and next few weeks. So as we're hosting these webinars weekly, we are addressing topics that are kind of relevant for the current time. At some point in a couple of weeks, hopefully sooner than later, we're going to move into what are some of the things that your center can do as you prepare to open, and what are some of the changes in your business model that you may want to consider going forward to accommodate this new situation. So I'm sure we'll be talking about that quite a bit in the upcoming weeks. But thank you, Pat, for bringing that up. And Lisa, thank you for addressing the league bowlers or the banking funds as well. Of course, always huge part of our business, and definitely a part of our clientele that we must not overlook. Okay, thank you everybody for sharing this feedback. And Pat, Jesse, do we want to move into demonstrating the new tool that you have developed?
Yes, I'll let Jesse handle that. We've been going through exercises almost on a daily basis, so he's well equipped to do that. One thing, let me just mention one other thing about the loan on the PP. It's a 1% loan. You can't get money that cheap. So make sure when you apply for it, apply for the full amount. And Jesse will go through and tell you how much you'll have to have left over. You can pay it back immediately, or you have 2 years in order to pay it. But it's a very, you're not going to find money that cheap. Go ahead, Jesse.
All righty. So right now what we're looking at is one of the pages of this workbook. So the first two, the cover and the eligibility page, are just to get you prepped and basically lay down the vocabulary that you're going to be seeing throughout this. Because as Pat can attest to, there's a lot that went into this bill and there's a lot that they're constantly changing. So it's good to get yourself a bit informed. Now, if we get rid of that, starting here at the top here, you're going to see that we're going to calculate our average monthly payroll costs. Now, this is going to be based on a few things. First off, did your bank give you a custom date, or are they letting you run with the dates that were outlined in the bill? If they did give you a custom date, you can just select yes or no on here, and it'll lead it through or lead you through it from there. Now, in our case, let's just say they did give us a custom date. We're not a seasonal employer, and we were operational in 2019. As a result, they're going to expect us to provide payroll information from April 1st of 2019 to March 27th of 2020. And for the calculations that are coming up, that's a 10-month span, and we'll be dividing by 10 for those. So from there, we're going to be inputting what's called included payroll costs. This is the payroll costs that they're willing to take into consideration for this loan, as well as any excluded payroll costs. This would be compensation for employees that make over $100,000 per year. This would be certain kinds of payroll taxes. This would be for employees whose principal place of residence is outside the U.S., things like that.
Jesse,
Yeah.
just one correction. That should be 12 months. You did that for, remember.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're completely correct. And actually, I can fix that. Oh, it's a protected sheet. So I'll have that fixed before we send this out. So actually, in that case, let me just switch here. In the event that your bank did give you a custom date range, you can just go ahead and put that in here, and it'll automatically calculate out the number of months. So let's say in this case, we had March to July, we have a 4-month period. Now from there, we're going to get our maximum loan amount. This is the average monthly payroll cost for the period that they had us calculated for, multiplied by 2.5 times. And this is the most that you can get out of that loan. Now, again, your bank might have some considerations on this, but you can expect about this much. Next up, we're going to find out what our forgivable expenses are. Now, on this loan, there are certain expenses that the bank is just going to forgive part of the loan for and that you won't have to pay back. These would be things such as your payroll costs, your mortgage interest, your utility payments, the rent that you have to pay. Now, the forgivable expenses, at least 75% of that total needs to be in payroll costs. They're not going to let you fire everyone and then just pay off all your bills with it. They want you to be paying employees. So from here, we can enter all of our different payroll costs, and it's going to calculate out how much of this loan is going to be remaining for us that we haven't utilized yet, and tell us what's the breakdown of these different expenses. So for instance, if I had higher mortgage interest here, let's say $6,000, you'll notice that since now my the portion of this total that is not payroll is over 25%, that's going to be an amount that we're anticipating they're not going to forgive for us. But up into that amount, they will be forgiving. Now, finally, we're going to calculate the expected loan forgiveness based on what are called FTEs. These are full-time equivalent employees. You can think of this as your number of full-time employees plus all of your part-time hours divided by 30. So for instance, if I had 12 part-timers and they each worked about 20 hours each, so we had a total of 240 hours for this week, we would actually have 8 full-time equivalent employees for that week, just by the way that they're doing the math. So from here, we're going to take our full-time employees, the total that we had on average during the date range, as well as the total hours worked by part-time employees during that date range. This would be the total throughout that entire range. And it's going to calculate out what our average monthly FTEs are for that date range. And we're going to do that for 2 date ranges. The reason why we're doing it for these 2 different date ranges is you're actually given the option to base the loan forgiveness based on your FTEs for each of these ranges. So it might end up being more advantageous to use one over the other because, as Pat had mentioned earlier, this is going to be compared to your current FTEs as of that 8th week of the loan. What I mean by that is you can see I've already pre-filled in some dummy information here. But last year, let's say we had 12 employees during this time, and between June and January, we actually did a bunch of hiring. We had a bunch of renovations. And so we have more employees back in January and February. Well, right now we've started hiring people back. We've been able to bring a lot of people back. But by the time that this loan is finished, we were only able to bring back 14. Well, this has consequences on how much of the loan we'll be paying back. So since we had more employees now than we did during this period last year, pretty much the entire amount that could have been forgiven will still be considered forgivable. So if I scroll back up here, all these amounts that we were going to consider forgiven, this entire 50 grand, will be forgiven. But if we compare against our, the beginning of the year, so January and February of 2020, at which point we've actually shrunk, well, because of that, not as much of that amount is going to be forgiven, and we're going to have to pay more back. And this sheet is going to help you basically estimate how much of that you are going to have to pay back. And with that, that's pretty much the end of it. There's a section down here for seasonal employers, but that is pretty much the gist of it. Now, as Pat said, this is changing pretty much every single day. I'm getting calls from every day. Hey, there's some new thing, like we had to add in that custom date function. So this will change a bit every day. Well, not every day, but as the changes come in, but we will be making this available to everyone. And in the event that there are updates, we'll be letting you know.
Yeah, this is just a projection that could help you out. It really comes into play when you start your 8-week program, and can help you to understand how much you're going to be able to get forgiven and what you may have in a loan or you want to pay back at that point. One of the most important things is getting this data. There's a lot of data involved in this, and Lisa can attest to this because we've done it so many times. So if you take the period, if you do 219, you're going to have to gather all your payrolls together. That includes the tip, that includes the local taxes, and if you're giving people health insurance or care insurance, that is all included, and that's where you're going to get your average total monthly salary at that point. The bank is going to require that. And they'll take a period of the trailing 12 months, as I mentioned before, or they'll say, let's use 2019 as far as that's concerned. And then what we've done over here, giving you a good idea with the two ranges, once you do the formulas based on those, then you pick what's going to allow you to keep the most amount of money and work it out. So it was just a little exercise we did. And we're going to offer this through QubicaAMF to everyone, no cost whatsoever. If it helps you, we'd be more than happy to help you along and help you understand what the PPP is and how much you can help you, keep your business going.
Thank you so much, Pat. That's quite useful information, and I imagine a lot of our customers and viewers may be overwhelmed with just the volume of information and things changing constantly. So thank you so much, you and the rest of our panel, John, Brian, Jesse, thank you for demonstrating this. Your insights and contributions are very much appreciated. And thank you for working hard to help our community and industry return to prosperity. In the face of this crisis, you have been working very hard and under immense pressure to support the industry and all of the people that depend and rely on you. And on top of all of that, you're so willing to share all of your knowledge and experience. And we all appreciate your generosity very much. At this point, I would like to ask our participants to submit any questions they may have. I will give you a few moments to do this. You can go ahead and submit your questions via the chat feature. It should be on the bottom of your screen. In the meantime, let me review the resources that we have available here at QubicaAMF to help support you and help you navigate through this difficult time. QubicaAMF.com, our corporate website. I'm going to pull it up right now so you can see firsthand some of the pieces that I'm going to point out. Resources for COVID-19. If you click on this page, you will see plenty of information here. Don't forget our customer portal and eShop, they're available to you 24/7. Beyond the frame, I want to talk about this for a minute. All shared content that we have created is available in this section of our website. You can access the Facebook page directly from here. The schedule for all of our webinars and the direct link to the recording of last week's webinar is also here, as well as all of the content, tools, blog posts that we have created over the last couple of weeks. You can find all of this from our resources for COVID-19 site on Beyond the Frame. Further down, you will see Maintain Your Center, and if you click on that, you will see again several different pieces of information pertaining to maintaining your center, some of the best practices on how to properly shut down your system for extended period of time, how to turn on and off your monitors and super touches, all of these things that we may not do frequently. So support material to assist you with that, optimum temperature to keep your center at for the time that you're closed. And in addition to that, we have other industry resources available as well. IAPA, BPAA, and SBA. Again, this is just a shortcut for you to be able to access these resources as you're going along. Again, we talked about Beyond the Frame Facebook group and our QubicaAMF worldwide Facebook page. Again, lots of information shared there daily. We feature stories, cool things that other centers are doing. You can see a lot of videos from head pins, things that Lisa and Pat reference. Lots of useful information, even if you're looking for ideas on different things that you can implement in your centers and things you can do along the way. I highly recommend that you look at our resources closely. I'm going to pause here for a second and address one of the questions that came in. When calculating payroll, do you adjust if you were closed due to hurricane and/or floods? Pat and Jesse, I'm going to say this is probably best question for you guys.
That's a good question. That's a good question. Yeah, what I would do is I would contact the bank and let them know that you may have to do the seasonal versus the full. It's all according how long you were down during that period of time, but it definitely would affect your average payroll because they're taking that 12-week period, they're just dividing it by the total of the benefits and the gross wages and dividing it by 12. So you may qualify with that and play with it. And you can play with our program with that by using that and maybe taking those months out of there to get a higher dollar cost for the payroll to get, be eligible for more dollars.
Okay. Kim, let us know if this answered your question or if you have any further questions. Oh, here's another one. I'm a sole proprietor with no payroll. Does any loan forgiveness programs apply to us? What kind, if loan, could I apply? Brian, this seems like a somewhat similar situation to your scenario. Any advice?
Yes, for the sole proprietor, you do have the ability to apply for the PPP program as well, as I said earlier. The question is, nobody seems to have the complete answer in regards to, from your Schedule C, what you actually have to put down as payroll costs. Some say you use just your net profit. Some say you have to go off of your gross. Nobody seems to have the answer yet in regards to that. That's one of the big things that I'm still pushing on, but that program is specifically designed for sole proprietors as well as any 1099 employees.
Okay, very good. Brian, I can actually hear frustration in your voice. I know because I talk to you every day. you've been very frustrated with this, but keep fighting for it. Hopefully soon you will have your answers, as well as some of our customers. Okay. We have a small family-owned center in Elmira, New York. Hi, John. Can you tell me how the PPP works if you consider your center seasonal? That's a good question.
Well, there's, go ahead, Jesse, do you have the seasonal formula over there?
Jesse, if you want to
let me
share
go
your
ahead and pull
screen
this
again.
up. Yeah.
It's March 1st through June 30th. You're able to take the payrolls during the March 1st through June 30th for seasonal. And then that will establish, you go to seasonal on there.
There you go.
Yeah. March 1st through June 30th. So you'll take that payroll range, you'll add up all of the state taxes, you know, the gross payroll, if you have any benefits included in there. And then like Jesse has right here, so on our formula, it'll divide it by 4 to give you the average monthly dollars. And then that is going to be multiplied by the 2.5. So you're going to be eligible for $125,000. And then remember, the real exercise starts in the 8-week period. And the good part is you could start out slow building the employees, but the main thing is by that 8th week, you want to have the closest you possibly can to the full-time and equivalent full-time numbers that you had for the period of time that you did the FTEs. Does that answer your question?
It's also worth noting that as far as it stands now, seasonal employers are locked to the February 15th to June 30th comparison range. They do not have the 2 options that non-seasonal employers do, where they're allowed to choose between the 2-date range to see which one's more advantageous.
Yeah, and that may be advantageous for the northern centers because of, you know, the business cycle goes down. But I would play with the spreadsheet and see what program, what dates benefit you the most.
And I'd like to add too that when calculating your payroll, and we've submitted all of ours, we use a PEO or a leasing company. Some of you may do that, you may not. But we included gross, we included state unemployment, and we also pay workers' comp through payroll. And we were able to add that as well as the administrative fee that the payroll company charges. So all those figures together, plus any benefits that you pay for any medical, dental, vision, that also is in your payroll figure. So make sure you're calculating all of that when you're plugging it into your whether it's the 12-month 2019 range or the 12. We originally started out with 12 months. What do they call that backwards? So we went from March 27th this year back trailing 12 months back to April, and then one of the banks said, no, we don't want that. We want the full 2019. So it depends upon the bank that you're dealing with. They may want your payroll information differently.
Yeah, they may want your tax returns, and we had to provide that, or there's all different scenarios they'll come up with and asking for additional information for you.
Sure, I believe that. Thank you for answering that. And I think, Lisa, with what you have said, I think you might have just answered our next question. Let me read it real quick. When calculating average monthly payroll, do we include the employer paid taxes such as unemployment, or just the amount actually paid to the employee?
Right. It's you absolutely include only what you pay the state. So any of the federal taxes that you pay, you can't utilize that. So just the state unemployment, not Social Security or federal taxes. So state unemployment, yes, and then workers' comp and administrative.
And even
fees.
if there's a state tax, you add that in.
Yeah.
You add it back to the total.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. We have applied directly through the SBA. Should we continue to apply through our banks?
Yes, I would, just like Wells Fargo did. You know, they cut it off, or they hit a certain level, and it's just overwhelming. again, they'll probably come back. It's not bad to put your application in, but you can't take both of them. I'm sure the SBA would catch on to it, but it's better to be proactive and apply and take the first one that comes. You know, it'll be based on the same formulas. So I would definitely reach out there and find anyone that is willing to take it, whether it's SBA provider, community bank, or, you know, a credit union, wherever you have a relationship, number one.
Gotcha.
Natasha,
Thank you.
Pat, if I can add into that just quickly, I actually experienced that situation because I had applied past Saturday through one bank, and my bank flat out said, well, send us your stuff, we'll send it through, and if it's already been approved or processed, the SBA will kick it out because of the tax ID number. And sure enough, mine had not been processed, and they were able to get it processed. So I would definitely echo those comments and say, yes, apply until somebody says, yes, it's already been applied.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Is there any other loans available besides the PPP?
Yeah, there's a number of loans, and they're state loans. In the state of Florida, you're eligible to get a $50,000 no interest for 12 months. And each state has some other programs. So if you go on the SBA site or the state site, you should be able to find those. But you can't, it's similar to like the 504. The 504 pays my interest and it pays my principal. I can't double dip with the PPP. So I can't take that same deduction forgiveness on that loan. So you could blend two loans together as long as they're not for the same purpose.
And the EIDL loan that you can apply for at the SBA, that loan works off of your total income. And what it actually does is the payback is at 4%. But at the same time you apply for that loan, you can also apply for a $10,000 grant that gets distributed right away within 3 days. And that $10,000 grant, you do not have to pay back.
Okay, that's good to know. Hey, Brian, for the PPP, if you apply as a sole proprietor, even if you don't pay yourself, can you still apply?
Yeah, you use it again. It's going to come off of the information from your Schedule C that you do fill out when you apply for just your regular tax at the end of the year.
Okay. The PPP wording says we must be back to full staffing by June 30th to obtain maximum PPP forgiveness. What periods do you use to calculate FTEs as of that date? Also, are you sure you use 30 hours for the calculation rather than 40? I can't find specific guidance on that.
Yeah, Lisa will speak to that.
Yeah, it's actually in that 800-page bill. They consider full-time to be 30 hours. That's why you want to do the full-time equivalent. And the language in the bill says, in order to get to that full-time equivalent number, you would take your 8 weeks of payroll from January 1st of 2020 through February 29th of 2020. And you would, if you could put those in a spreadsheet, separate out your full-time. Anybody that's 30 or more is considered full-time, put them in a separate column. Then your leftover part-time people, you're gonna add up those hours, and then you're gonna divide that by 30. You're gonna add that number of employees with your full-time employees. That's your full-time equivalent. Now, it's interesting, I might add, that I went back and did this for one of our Naples locations, and we averaged about 57 to 62, 63 employees every single week. That's how many people we were paying. After I did this exercise, the full-time equivalent came down to 42. And that's good because that's that magic number that you've got to get to by week 8. So even though we might have 10 people on the payroll right now, by the time we get to week 8, if we can get up there to 36, 37, 38, that's going to dictate how much money comes back to us in that payroll.
And I think the other part of the question was the program starts the day of funding. So let's say you get funded on April 10th. So 8 weeks from April 10th is going to bring you, that starts your program right there. So that's when the expenses and the payrolls are all going to go into that projection that we have in the Dazzle form at that point. You can't postpone it. You can't say, well, I want to wait a little longer. It's the day of funding is the birth date, let's call it. And then 8 weeks after that is
Up to June 30th.
And after that period, and there may be an extension to the program. If you look at the application, they changed the application date from 6/30/2020 to 9/30/2020. So I think they're leaving themselves some room to extend the program. It's just something that after watching all these applications, we noticed.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you for sharing that, Pat. Okay, next question. Family-owned center currently shut down with all employees laid off. Does it make sense to apply for the PPP since we have no payroll, or is the EIDL make more sense?
No, it definitely, no, because if you're going to reopen, remember, it doesn't, well, you have to have some payroll during that period. Say we open in the 4th or 5th week, they're going to subsidize your payroll when you're transitioning the opening. And then it's also going to be, you're going to be eligible for the utilities and all of the utilities and the interest or rents during the period of time. I think the little dazzle will help you try to figure that out. So it's an exercise you go through and make the decision at that point.
Yeah.
And also, if you start out in week 1, you get the funding, and you've only got one employee or no employee. By the time you get to the 8-week program and your full-time equivalence is 10 people, and you get to 10 people and you get them hired back on your payroll, then 100% of it's going to be forgiven.
Yeah, and think of this too.
Sure.
It's a 1% loan for 2 years. So if you apply for it, and even if you don't have the payroll, you still have the loan, and you have 2 years at 1%.
Right.
It's also worth noting that the loan is based on payroll of the prior year or the first 2 months of this year. So even if you laid off all of your employees, you can still get that loan. So it's not a worry there.
Right. See, yeah, because it takes information from the previous year. Makes perfect sense. Thank you. So does it say how long the employees have to be employed after the 8 weeks?
No, well, so far we can't find anything in the law. And talking to the experts we've talked to, after the 8th week, you could almost lay them off. If your business is not operating, you could cut back on the payroll. It's only based on when the anniversary of the 8th week falls. But I would check with my CPAs. I would check with my bankers, but that's our interpretation from people we spoke to. Disclaimer.
Okay, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for clarifying that. I think that is all of the questions that I see right now. Oh, here's one more. How can we receive the Excel program shown? Pat, do you prefer that our customers reach out to you or us?
Jesse and you guys figure out the best.
Okay.
We'll make it available after we complete this. Then you have an email list for all the people.
Yes, I do, and I'm also going to share our email address where they can reach out to us and ask any further questions or any information they may need. So
Sure.
I'll share that in a minute.
Okay.
No worries. Okay, I want to take advantage of all of you guys being here. I'm going to read you a couple of questions that came in to our email prior to the webinar. Looking forward, should we be implementing social distance policies? What does that look like? We touched on this a little bit previously. Pat, do you want to elaborate on this, or Brian?
This is a discussion we're having at QubicaAMF and at our centers alike. It's going to really be based on our local laws and what's happening, because whether we're only allowed a gathering of 10 people. We've talked about possibly having leagues bowl, one team bowl on a pair, and then the next team comes up after they finish up. So we have the distancing over there. We're thinking that at the beginning, we're going to have some of that separation. We're talking about how we're going to address it on our online reservations. We really have to take the temperature of the customers and just in general, the public on where we go from here. We're following what's going on in Korea and China, but more in Korea because we have a lot of connections over there. We do a lot of business over there at QubicaAMF and see what they're doing. But I think, as I mentioned earlier, it's going to be a different way of doing business, mostly at the beginning, to just judge, the temperature of people.
Yes, I agree. Thank you. Brian, do you have anything to add to that?
No, again, just what Pat said. I think a lot of it is going to come down to a state-by-state basis and depending upon the rules that they put in place. And I think, the biggest thing is we don't really know at this time yet what that's going to look like. But obviously, as they start to roll out some of those rules and regulations, we will have to adjust. Each center is almost going to have to adjust to what is available. I know being smaller, a couple of the things that we have decided to think about was we do a lot of private events where we used to book out the facility. So a few of the bigger things we're thinking of is we can actually offer, if they allow us to be every other lane or every third or fourth lane, we'll take less reservations and we'll almost treat that group as a private event at that moment. So only having maybe 2 or 3 of those groups in the center at a time. So again, it's going to come down to a state-by-state basis and what they allow to happen as far as those rules. And at this point in time, we just don't really have enough of that information yet.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. And yes, like I said earlier, in the upcoming weeks, we're going to address a lot, if not all of these questions and topics, and do the best we can to provide you support and resources, best practices, things of that nature, to help you transition back and address some of these things the best of your ability. John, I'm going to address this one to you, and we can ask, of course, your friends to help out. But how can we as an industry and independent small business owners bounce back financially? If new regulations go into effect and I have to buy plexiglass and limit the number of customers in the center, that will greatly negatively impact the small profit margin that I have. I think this is going to be a legit concern for quite a few folks out there. Any thoughts on that, John?
Absolutely, I agree. There is going to be some bumps in this road that we're going to have to fix. And the one thing that's already been mentioned that has been coming up is to try to utilize every other lane to space people out. I guess in that simple sense, I'm a 32-lane center. I would really look at stuff to say, oh, if I owned a 16-lane center, what would that look like, from a staffing standpoint, food ordering and everything else. Might be the simple way to kind of think about that. But when it comes to leagues, again, Pat had mentioned it, the thought of, doing a traditional league into 2 shifts is something that we've thought of as well. But at the end of the day, it is about capacity. And if, obviously the profit margin is already low enough, where it's a bit of a challenge as it is, I guess really the simplest way to think about it is if you had half as many lanes in the same size building, what would you do to run that? That to me, I think is probably the easiest way to think about a very complex problem, because there really is no simple solution to this whole deal. Invariably, your business better than we do. So kind of whatever might work in your place might not work down the street, but at the same time it might. So yeah, that's my instinctive thought on it. If any of the other panelists have any thoughts they want to share.
I agree with you, John. I think the big thing is going to be knowing how, the regulations go in from each state. I think the second thing is going to be, are they able to come up with something that allows more people to be tested so that we know that they do have it or they don't have it? I think until some of that stuff actually happens, it's going to be hard for us to regulate exactly what's going to happen going forward. But I think as this time goes by in the next, hopefully 3-4 weeks, hopefully we can get some more clarification on some of that. And then going forward with some of the webinars that we plan to do weekly, hopefully we'll be able to give some better answers in regards to some of this.
Yes, for sure. Like Pat mentioned earlier, our friends in Korea and China and a couple other places, they're starting to open back up for business. They're a few weeks ahead of us. and they're also going to be implementing some of these things to overcome some challenges that are going to result in maybe, practicing social distancing, things of that nature. So we will definitely do our best to gather as much as information as we possibly can, and also amongst each other brainstorm and figure out what is the best way to overcome some of these challenges. So again, keep checking our resources on our website at QubicaAMF.com. If you're able to join our like our QubicaAMF Facebook page, join Beyond the Frame group, and keep in touch with us as our panelists, and many of you are doing so well communicating with your customers. We're doing the best we possibly can as well to keep you up to date and provide as much useful information and resources as we possibly can. To include today's webinar and our fantastic panel of experts, I again thank you so much for taking the time out of your day. We know you are quite busy trying to navigate this chaos, just like many of us and our customers, more importantly. At this time, it looks like we have answered all of your questions, at least the ones that have come in so far. I do have our Max Training admin at QubicaAMF.com address on the screen. If you have any further questions, need any additional information, or if you wish to receive a copy of the tool that Jesse and Pat walked us through, please send us a quick email, let us know, and we will address that at our earliest convenience. A recording of this webinar will be available through our customer portal. Simply log in from our QubicaAMF.com corporate website page, and you can access the portal or register for the portal. Once you access it, you will find a variety of pre-recorded webinars that you can view at your leisure. And like I said, at this point, I don't think, Mark, you're very welcome. I don't see any additional questions that have come in. Thank you again for our panelists, and thank you for joining us. To all of our participants, we hope that you have enjoyed this webinar and will consider joining us again in the upcoming weeks. Above all, we hope that you will stay healthy and well. Remember, tough times don't last. Tough people do. We're all in this together. Have a great day, everyone, and hopefully we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Stay safe. Stay healthy.
Thank you.
You
Thank
as
you,
well.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Possible to give the government numbers. So